Have you ever had an idea that you felt could change your life? Maybe it was a story that played out in your head, or an invention you've imagined pitching on Shark Tank. We've all had an idea that we felt would be amazing, but very few of us have ever rolled up our sleeves and ridden the roller coaster of a journey that it takes to execute that idea. Well, in July of 2014, an inventor named Ryan Greer posted a video on the crowdfunding platform Kickstarter. The clip featured a smiling man in a sunny backyard demonstrating what he called a, quote, portable party disguised as a cooler. He blended margaritas using a battery-powered blender built into the lid, blasted music from a waterproof Bluetooth speaker tucked into a side compartment, flipped burgers on a built-in cutting board, pulled cold beer from an ice chest, and even charged his smartphone through a USB port. The contraption looked like something Q from the James Bond series would create, combined with a beach party infomercial. It was called the Coolest Cooler, and Greer pitched it as a tool that would instantly turn every picnic, tailgate, and camping trip into a festive atmosphere bordering on music festival. But, like most stories on this channel, what followed would become nothing short of infamous. Over the next 5 years, the Coolest Cooler saga would veer from viral success to manufacturing nightmare, from anger over broken promises to lawsuits and government investigations. Tens of thousands of backers would wait years for their coolers. Thousands would never receive them at all. Greer would be hailed as a crowdfunding genius and then blasted as a huckster. In late 2019, the company would collapse, blaming a 25% tariff on Chinese imports for the death blow. And in the early 2020s, Greer would essentially vanish from the internet. The story is a cautionary tale about how hype can destroy good intentions. It raises questions about how platforms like Kickstarter protect backers, and whether creators truly understand the logistics of mass production, and what happens when an idea promises the world but runs headlong into reality. As we trace the Coolest Cooler's trajectory over its 5-year lifespan, we'll see how each decision, delay, and controversy fits into a chronology of expectations turned sour. And by the end, it will become clear how time itself became an antagonist in this modern tech fable. So hello everybody, today we're going to be talking about the Coolest Cooler Kickstarter catastrophe. I remember people talking about this thing and then it seemed to just vanish off the earth. Well, it vanished to me. In reality, it exploded in more of a fiery car crash. And the whole story now serves as a cautionary tale to those who collect funds and those who donate. All around something that was a great idea, but a not so great execution. So if all of that sounds interesting to you, then stick around after the ad as we talk about Kickstarter's biggest failed campaign. Given the season, you've probably been up to some spring cleaning, and you've probably realized how annoying it is to keep up with a ton of pills and multivitamins that you hate taking. Well, now that can all be one easy step thanks to today's sponsor, AG1. AG1 is your daily nutritional supplement packed with things like multivitamins, multiminerals, pre and probiotics. And instead of being a bunch of pills and doses you have to keep track of, AG1 is one easy drink and one easy step, because all you need is 8 to 12 ounces of water and a spoonful of AG1 and you're good to go. AG1 has a ton of nutrients to help with things like your gut health, to keep you regular, or to support your immune system. But the thing I noticed the most about it was how it helped my energy. I used to be awful about taking naps midway through the day or not wanting to finish projects I started in the morning. But AG1 helped me find the energy to keep going and to get more done. And it's not that AG1 is some kind of stimulant you have to keep track of. It's just amazing what your body can do when you put the things into it that it's been asking for. Spring's the perfect time to not only clean out your cabinet, but to clean out your system. And right now is the perfect time to get in on their offer. It's because right now, if you head to the link in the description at drinkag1.com/Wendigang, along with your order of AG1, you'll get a free welcome kit. That's right, a welcome kit that includes things like a shaker bottle, a metal canister to store your AG1, a flavor sampler of the different flavors AG1 comes in, as well as a bottle of vitamin D3 and K2 to get even more of the nutrients you need. Once again, that's drinkag1.com/Wendigang to get in on this incredible offer today. Thank you to AG1 for sponsoring the channel. Their link will be in the description, and we are now back to the video. We are going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. Kickstarter was launched by Perry Chin, Yancey Strickler, and Charles Adler in 2009. Their idea was simple. Rather than pitching a product to venture capitalists or traditional investors, creators could bypass gatekeepers and directly appeal to the public, like a democratized version of Shark Tank. If enough people pledged money, the project would be funded. If not, no one would be charged and the project would not proceed. It was essentially an all-or-nothing model. This level of access to capital resonated with artists, filmmakers, gadget makers, and entrepreneurs who had previously been shut out of mainstream funding avenues. I mean, when we did the Stalker film, it was only possible because of Kickstarter, and of course, more than that, your all's generosity. Thanks again. But Kickstarter allowed us a position to take in funds while also allowing you guys to make sure that we were accountable for those funds. When things go as they're supposed to, the website works great. Kickstarter's early years were marked by modest projects, many in the arts. However, as the platform's visibility grew, it drew in technology innovators. In 2012, a company called Oculus VR raised $2.4 million to develop the Oculus Rift virtual reality headset, a campaign that gave many people their first taste of VR and eventually led to Facebook's $2 billion acquisition. I'm sure most of us know of the Oculus Rift, but you probably didn't know that it started on Kickstarter. In 2013, Peloton launched a campaign to fund its first connected exercise bike and went on to become a publicly traded company. The party game Cards Against Humanity started on Kickstarter in 2010, which quickly created a cult following. These successes showed that Kickstarter could be a launchpad for profitable companies, not just passion projects. They also set the stage for bigger, more ambitious campaigns that made some equally lofty promises. At the same time, Kickstarter's model created expectations that would later haunt the creators of these projects. Like I said, Kickstarter is all or nothing. If a campaign meets or exceeds its funding goal, backers' credit cards are charged and the creator receives the money. If the campaign does not reach its goal, no one pays. This protects backers from funding under-supported projects, but also means that the moment a campaign succeeds, the creator inherits the obligation to deliver. Importantly, at the same time, pledging on Kickstarter is not the same as purchasing a finished product. The company's terms of service emphasize that backers are merely funding an idea. There are no guarantees on delivery. This nuance is easy to miss when glossy videos make a project look like it's ready for store shelves, and in Kickstarter's early days, it was even easier to miss. A 2015 study from the University of Pennsylvania estimated that about 9% of Kickstarter projects ultimately failed to deliver rewards to backers. That failure rate might sound small, but when a project involves tens of thousands of backers, 9% of undelivered rewards translates to a lot of disappointed and angry people. Meanwhile, the world of crowdfunding was broadening beyond Kickstarter. Sites like Indiegogo, GoFundMe, and specialized platforms for films and video games emerged. Each had its own rules and incentives, but they shared a common DNA. All of them invited the crowd to fund creative ventures. The success of Oculus and Peloton created a sense that almost any good idea could be turned into a lucrative business if it captured the internet's imagination. And it was this climate of optimism, along with a brilliant campaign and the explosive growth of social media, that would play directly into the coolest coolers' rise. So let's talk about the man behind the idea. When Ryan Greer appeared on Kickstarter in July of 2014, he was not a household name. Born in the Pacific Northwest and based in Portland, Oregon, Greer had a background as a product designer and entrepreneur. Before the cooler, he tinkered with inventions and worked on marketing projects. His friends described him as enthusiastic and creative, someone who believed strongly in do-it-yourself solutions. The coolest cooler wasn't his first attempt at combining functionality with leisure. He had previously attempted to crowdfund the cooler in November of 2013, but set his funding goal at $125,000 and fell short, raising about $100,000. Still impressive, but ultimately unsuccessful. Unable to hit the self-mandated threshold, the first attempt failed. But rather than give up, Greer regrouped. Or perhaps he regrepped, huh? One key lesson from the 2013 campaign was timing. Launching a cooler in November, when people in much of the United States are thinking about sweaters at Thanksgiving, was less than ideal. Greer realized that the height of summer would be a better moment to capture imaginations. He also refined the design, adding features and improving aesthetics based on feedback. In the meantime, he studied how to craft a better crowdfunding video. Kickstarter campaigns live or die by their ability to tell a compelling story, and Greer went all in on narrative. He emphasized lifestyle and fun rather than product specs. He cultivated a persona as an affable gear geek who wanted to create the ultimate party tool. By the time he launched in July of 2014, He had a more polished pitch and a better understanding on the platform's dynamics. So on July 8th of 2014, Grepper launched the second Coolest Cooler campaign with a modest funding goal of $50,000, which $50,000 is still a lot, but if we're talking about the manufacturing, transportation, and selling of a bunch of coolers, it's really not that much, especially when the cooler is this complicated. He set the pledge tier so that backers could pre-order a cooler for about $165 to $185 and promised an eventual retail price of $299. And it seems that his newfound skills in marketing paid off, because within 24 hours, the project blew past its goal, raising $1 million. That's right, he set his goal at $50,000 and raised 20 times that. In a day. Within 2 days, it had raised $2 million, and by the end of its 52-day run, it had collected more than $13.2 million from over 62,000 backers. At the time, this made the Coolest Cooler the most funded project in Kickstarter's 5-year history. More than Oculus, more than Cards Against Humanity, all that. Headlines from CNN Money to Fox News to The Guardian marveled at the phenomenon. The idea of viral crowdfunding was brand new at the time, and mainstream news loved the story. A cooler with a blender and speakers outselling many tech gadgets. And part of the reason people were so excited about the product came from the product itself. The Coolest Cooler was loaded with features: a rechargeable 18-volt battery powering a strong blender capable of crushing ice, a waterproof Bluetooth speaker that detached for convenience, a USB port for charging devices, an LED light for night use, a built-in bottle opener, a cutting board, and integrated plates and utensils. You're starting to see why this cooler would sell for nearly $300. Because if all went well, it's like $500 worth of equipment packed in one place that you can just carry in one step. The design of bright orange with large wheels and handles looked both rugged and fun. The promise was that you could throw a party anywhere. Grepper's video showed people at the beach blending drinks, at a park listening to music, and on a boat slicing limes. The timing contributed to the buzz. The summer of 2014 was a period of relative economic optimism, and social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter amplified the video far beyond Kickstarter. The campaign's momentum created a feedback loop. As more people backed it, press coverage increased, which attracted even more backers. People who might have hesitated were swayed by the visible success and the fear of missing out on a new trend. Especially because when the Kickstarter began, it was a question of if this thing would be funded or not. But now, since it so far surpassed its funding goal, you're pretty much getting the cooler everyone's going to be talking about at a reduced price. Comment sections were filled with excitement, and backers imagined how they could use the cooler. The phrase "portable party" became a catchphrase, not to be confused with porta potty. Although I suppose, depending on how crazy things get with the cooler, that may also be needed. All of this was happening over the course of July and August of 2014. Those 2 months would later be remembered as the high point of the coolest hype, which is to say, it was all downhill from here. The Coolest Cooler campaign ended in late August of 2014. According to the original plan, backers were promised delivery in February of 2015. That 6-month timeline seemed feasible to many because the product looked mostly complete in the video. In reality, producing tens of thousands of complex units is a challenge even for seasoned manufacturers. The first major issue arose around the scale of production. Grepper had a leap from building prototypes to manufacturing in a Chinese factory capable of producing at least 60,000 units. He quickly discovered that raising $13 million doesn't mean you have that much in cash to spend, as much of it is earmarked for manufacturing, shipping, and reward fulfillment. Kickstarter also takes 5% of total funds raised for the project, and of course there's the other thing that takes a much higher percentage of any money you make ever: taxes. Just because people donate money to you on Kickstarter doesn't mean you don't have to pay taxes on that money. If that's how it worked, I would just do that all the time, forever. Another complication was component sourcing. For example, the motor for the blender was produced by a company that went on strike, halting the supply. Wheels, hinges, and battery components had to be redesigned for durability, and each change required new tooling and testing. The coolers were heavy and large, making shipping complex and expensive. Grepper announced in early 2015 that delivery would be delayed until July of 2015. He told backers that the delay was due to improvements and upgrades, such as stronger wheels and better hinges. He also insisted these upgrades would be provided at no extra cost to backers. Many supporters accepted this reasoning, especially because the communication at this point remained positive and transparent. Sure, with any delay some people will be upset, but if you're honest about why the delay is happening, most people will understand. For the first 1 or 2 delays. Behind the scenes, however, the scale of the challenge was dawning on the team. A Guardian article later noted that for Kickstarter projects that raise far more than planned, the sudden influx of funds and orders can be more of a curse than a blessing. Manufacturing tens of thousands of units requires different logistics than building a few hundred. It's all fun and games when you're building coolers in your garage, but not so fun and games when you have to open up a whole new industry. Grepper admitted he had to rethink production at every level, from finding partners to manufacture at scale to managing quality control. By July of 2015, some progress had been made and the first units even began shipping. And by November of 2015, thousands of backers had received their coolers. And luckily, the product worked as advertised. The blender blended, the speaker played, and the charger charged. And this is a pretty big deal. Normally in stories like this, once people actually get their hands on the product, they realize it is far worse than it was advertised as. But here, the people who received their coolest cooler enjoyed it. That is to say, those who received it. The delays had come with a cost. Grumbling from backers with unfulfilled orders began filtering through, as tens of thousands of people were still waiting. The timeline to fulfill these had shifted from 6 months to at least a year, and few realized that it would soon stretch far beyond even that. The next bumpy chapter of the Coolest Cooler saga centers on a decision that, at the time, Grepper framed as necessary for survival. In November of 2015, while thousands of backers were still waiting for their units, the company began selling the Coolest Cooler on Amazon for $499. Now, this, as you could imagine, caused a problem. Remember, early Kickstarter backers had pledged about $165 to $185 and were promised a retail price of around $299. Those backers were still waiting, but now anyone could order the cooler from Amazon and receive it within days, albeit for a higher cost. So they bought the cooler over a year ago at the price it was advertised as on the Kickstarter, and they still don't have theirs, but now they're watching the company sell coolers to other people at, granted, a price that's almost twice as high as what they said they would sell it for eventually. But regardless, they're watching people getting their shipped to them on an assembly line while they're still there holding the receipt. To many backers, this looked like a betrayal. They felt they had essentially loaned money to the company to bring the product to life, and now latecomers with deeper pockets were being served first. Grepper explained that the Amazon sales were a lifeline. With production costs far exceeding initial projections, the company needed an immediate influx of cash. I would argue this would be the point where you would go to private investors for stake in the company because you obviously have evidence that the product is worth something, but hey, what do I know? Why not sell it at double the price to people that haven't bought it yet? That's a great idea. Selling at a higher price to the general public would bring in more revenue, which Grepper claimed would be used to fund the remaining Kickstarter orders. Quote, "We thought Amazon would be a tremendous opportunity for us," one employee later said. However, the optics were terrible. In the social contract of crowdfunding, creators are expected to put backers first. Even if those backers got a good deal, they did so by taking on risk. Coolest Team's decision was seen as prioritizing new customers over those who had helped to make the project possible. This breach of trust would haunt the company for the rest of its days. I mean, even in situations where, like, funded projects take a long time to come out, there's still an expectation to first serve the people who made it come out. I mean, look at Chris Stuckman with Shelby Oaks. That movie took way longer than expected, but when it did come out, they did a ton of cool stuff with the marketing. They did that poster that had all of the Kickstarter supporters' names on the poster itself. Again, if you're verbal and there's reasons for the delay, people that believed in the product will probably still believe in the product. Now imagine if Chris Stuckman finished the movie and then sold it to people for like $50 a ticket, and then the people that supported the Kickstarter couldn't watch the movie. The Amazon listing created another practical problem. It opened the product to negative public reviews from angry backers. Disgruntled supporters flooded Amazon with 1-star ratings. They used the review system not because they had received the product, which most of them had not, but as a way to protest and deter new buyers. This activism damaged sales and increased the company's financial strain. News outlets such as The Guardian and Vice reported on the backlash, and the Coolest Cooler quickly became a cautionary example to other companies of how not to handle a crowdfunding windfall. Let's look at a screenshot of some of the Amazon reviews side by side. Like, here's someone that received their cooler. I love my Coolest Cooler. All I can say is that it lives up to its name. It is one sturdy, kick-ass cooler that keeps my stuff cold, blends my drinks, plays my music, etc. Cool, so a very satisfied customer. Let's look at one of the one-star reviews. Ponder your odds if you want to put your money on this product. Manufacturer didn't fulfill the Kickstarter pledges, and it's already selling the product on the market. That's such a crazy way to start an Amazon review. Ponder your odds? Like, did Charles Dickens not get his Coolest Cooler? Ponder your odds. Like, now whenever you open up your computer to look at the Kickstarter campaign, a troll flies through the window and is like, "Be wary, traveler." By early 2016, the Coolest Cooler project was teetering. Grepper admitted in March of 2016 that the company had spent the entire $13 million raised on Kickstarter and needed an additional $15 million to complete production. This may sound absurd, but there is a huge cost difference in building like 200 coolers and 60,000. 60,000 pretty complicated products with a lot of electronics and moving parts, especially when you didn't expect the project to do that well and you don't have any of that infrastructure set up to do anything like this on a large scale. Production had come to a halt while the team sought funding. In April of 2016, they proposed an idea for an expedited delivery option. For an extra $97, backers who were tired of waiting could jump to the front of the line and receive their cooler by the 4th of July. Essentially, the company was asking backers to pay nearly half as much as they originally pledged to finally get a product that had already been delayed over a year. This is a horrible idea. Hey babe, I know you're mad that you gave me $180 for that thing I'd said I'd get you that I never did, but I've got a deal. Give me half of that, and I won't give it to you right now, but I'll put you at the front of the line of the people that I'm going to eventually give it to, huh? And then, also, I'm offering this to everyone else, so the front of the line's going to get pretty packed if people do this, but if you give me half the money now, if again, the money you've already given me, you'll be in front of all those other peons who only gave me $180. What do you say? For old time's sake. Grepper claimed that this option came in response to some backers who said they would pay more to get their cooler sooner. That sounds like the kind of thing a few people would say in frustration and only half of them would really mean it. And even if they did really mean it, that is still a horrible reason to say this in front of everyone. Because once again, the optics suffered. The proposition just looked like extortion. Backers could either pay up now or keep waiting, maybe indefinitely. And with broken promises already, who's to say this carrot being dangled over them wouldn't continue to pull away? Surprisingly, about 10,000 backers did opt to pay the additional $97, totaling in nearly an extra $1 million in revenue, but not without an already tarnished reputation seeking even deeper. Which also, for the love of God, man, find an investor. There is some billionaire out there who will throw you $20 million if you give him 1% of this stuff. Why on earth would you ask the already mad people for more money? Reactions were polarized. Some backers were furious, arguing that paying more to receive what was already owed was unacceptable. Others reasoned that $97 was better than losing the entire investment. At the time, a Vice article referred to the scheme as a, quote, very uncool cooler. That sounds like the kind of stupid comment I would make. But the new fees did allow the company to restart the production in China, proof that the backers, not investors, were essentially funding the next phase. Grepper promised that the remaining 26,000 backers who did not pay would eventually receive their coolers using profits from future retail sales. This plan was a classic strategy of robbing Peter to pay Paul, using new funds to finish orders for those who paid extra, while hoping future sales would cover the rest. If you've ever taken out a loan on your mortgage to get into even more debt, this might sound familiar. Also, don't do that. Please, for the love of God, do not do that. You're better than that. I care about you. Moreover, the new fee signaled that the business model was unsustainable at the original pricing. By asking for more money, the company were implicitly admitting that the per unit costs were far higher than the pledge amounts. Grepper had wildly misunderstood the cost of his own invention. The $97 scheme also prolonged the timeline. Production had resumed, but slowly, and the shipping order became complicated due to the mixture of original and expedited orders. Confusion and frustration with distribution erupted internally. It also opened the company to accusations of class division within the backer community. Those who could afford an extra $100 were prioritized, leaving the others behind. And it was around this time that things got ugly. That's right, everything up until now has been pretty, believe it or not. This is the ugly part. The backlash against the coolest cooler escalated into something far beyond just negative comments on Kickstarter. As frustration mounted, a small but vocal group of backers began doxing the employees behind the coolest, which I understand people being mad, but you don't need to find out where these guys live. For my mom, my mother-in-law, and the 3 other people above the age of 19 who watch my videos, doxing is the practice of publicly releasing personal information. The doxers posted private contact details of Coolest Cooler employees online. People who had simply worked on the project began receiving harassing phone calls, abusive messages, and even death threats. One employee told Vice in 2016 that he had been doxed by a backer and that his phone was blowing up with calls, threats, and angry messages. Ryan Grepper's family was even threatened, and at the climax of insanity, one angry backer actually drove to their office while another had shown up at Grepper's house. I get being mad about this. I get especially being mad after they sell the cooler on Amazon and then they ask for another $100. I get all of that, but this is very clearly someone who got a little in above their head. This is not someone who took the money and ran and now they're in Tahiti sipping drinks on the beach with the only coolest cooler in existence. It's very clear they just don't know what they're doing, because this has got a lot more complicated than was originally intended. This is by no means, and there's very few things that would justify, going to someone's house. More than simply cause fear, the hostility also undermined the company's attempts to solve its cash flow problem. Grepper's marketing director noted that the wave of fake 1-star reviews on Amazon made it impossible to sell a lot of coolers. Sales from Amazon were supposed to fund outstanding orders, but negative reviews deterred potential buyers. This dynamic created yet another cyclical effect, this time in the shape of a downward spiral. Fewer sales meant less money to build and ship units, which meant more delays and more anger. At one point, a backer told Vice, quote, "I'm not sure that I could enjoy using it if I got it tomorrow." Which again, I understand being mad, but yes, you could. If it showed up tomorrow, you'd use it. It's a cooler that does cool stuff. Yes, you would. A cooler that was meant to create a party anywhere had now become the ultimate party pooper. After that line in the script, there is something written in the space beneath the paragraph that says, "Please don't blame Logan," who is the writer, for that line. "This one was all me." Signed, Randall. I know it was you, Randall. I know you're the only one who would say things like that in a script. Kickstarter's pre-2014 terms of use did not clearly protect backers. The old language said creators should make a good faith attempt to fulfill each reward and either deliver all promised rewards or refund backers whose rewards they cannot fulfill. However, it also stated that Kickstarter did not offer refunds and creators were not required to grant a refund unless they were unable or unwilling to deliver. There was no requirement to update backers on progress or explain how the money was spent. In other words, the rules were vague and enforcement was virtually non-existent. Because in a lot of these cases, it's hard to argue if someone is being willingly ignorant to getting the product across, or if they're having legitimate struggles and it's just taking a while. So it's hard to make any mainline rules, because what you don't want to happen is people to be afraid that if they get a Kickstarter project funded and they run into any problems, they'll suddenly be approached by the website with legal threats to give all the money back. In 2014, the Washington State Attorney General's office, which at the time was under Bob Ferguson, filed what was considered the first state enforcement action against a crowd-funded project, an online playing card campaign that raised about $25,000 but delivered nothing. This case signaled that state regulators were willing to intervene when creators took money and did not deliver. It set a precedent that would affect the Coolest Cooler. By 2016, the Oregon Department of Justice had opened an investigation into Coolest practices, citing hundreds of complaints, as you could imagine. The state's Unlawful Trade Practices Act prohibits misrepresentation and deception in consumer transactions. And in June of 2017, Coolest Cooler entered into an assurance of voluntary compliance with the Oregon Department of Justice. Under this agreement, the company had to ship units to 392 Oregon residents who had filed complaints within 120 days and to 481 other Oregon residents who had not yet received their coolers. For the more than 21,000 backers elsewhere who were still waiting, the agreement required Coolest to deposit at least 10% of net income from future sales into a backer fund to produce and ship coolers at cost over 3 years. If after 3 years a backer still hadn't received a cooler, the company would owe them $20, an amount that could not be discharged in bankruptcy. This is a pretty big deal. That means even if they start making money for these previous backers, they have to start setting aside money to build them coolers that they will make no profit from. They have to make sure that they are delivered at cost. And if after 3 years people don't have their coolers, then the company owes that person $20. $20 isn't a lot for a company, but when there are tens of thousands of backers who each are owed $20 if you don't get them a cooler, you can see how that becomes a problem. And even if the company goes bankrupt, the owners still owe them $20. The settlement also required Coolest to pay a $50,000 penalty to the Oregon Department of Justice. From a backer's perspective, the settlement was meager compensation after pledging about $185, waiting for years, and dealing with constant delays. Receiving $20 seemed insulting. However, the agreement was significant because it marked one of the first times in U.S. history that state authorities had forced a crowdfunding project to address consumer complaints. It suggested that Kickstarter campaigns were not completely lawless and that creators could be held accountable. The settlement also underscored that consumer protection law applies to crowdfunding, despite the informal, community-driven vibe of the platforms like Kickstarter. In other words, even if Kickstarter can enforce these things, the government will. Per the agreement, the Coolest Cooler had 3 years from June of 2017 to deliver to the remaining backers. The involvement of the Oregon DOJ signaled that the upstart Wild West of crowdfunding was no longer a niche means of getting financed. Regulators were now paying attention. Kickstarter responded by tightening its terms of service and rolling out tools like the project budget spreadsheet. Under the new terms, creators must complete the project and fulfill each reward, maintain honest communication, and, if they can't finish, post an update explaining what work has been done and how funds were used, demonstrate that they used funds appropriately, and offered to return any remaining money. They also added a mandatory risks and challenges section at every project page, requiring creators to disclose potential pitfalls. That way at least backers knew what problems might arise before they send in their money. Kickstarter wanted to remind users that backing a project is funding a creative process that may involve delays, changes, or even failure. While other large projects had failed to deliver, the Coolest Cooler fiasco made some of the most noise. A fitting end, given the way it all began, as one of the most popular Kickstarter campaigns ever, and its shortcomings were directly influential in Kickstarter's reforms. In all reality, this would be the only impact Coolest Cooler would ever make. The final act of the Coolest Cooler story happened at the hands of changing global trade policy. In December of 2019, Ryan Greer sent a final update to backers. Coolest Cooler was shutting down. In the message, he blamed the decision on a 25% tariff on Chinese imports that went into effect in 2018 and expanded in 2019. The entire Coolest product line was manufactured in China, and the tariff increase, Greer said, was, quote, devastating to our business and an insurmountable challenge. With cost rising and no cash reserves, the company could no longer operate. After 5 years of struggling, the Coolest Cooler would blend, feed, and entertain no more. The party, much like the dream, was dead. Oh look, another note from Randall under that one. Yes, this one's my fault too. Sue me. Maybe I will, Randall. Who knows? Maybe I will. There's one more party joke in this script. I'm gonna lose it. By late 2019, the Coolest Cooler had already burned through its crowdfunding capital, angered its backers with extra fees, and faced regulatory pressure. Sure, the Chinese tariff likely accelerated the end, But the project already had one insulated foot in the grave. Still, the tariffs' impacts had been very real. Companies that relied on Chinese manufacturing had to absorb cost increases or pass them on to consumers. For a company already operating at razor-thin margins, a 25% tariff was catastrophic. Grepper's final update offered condolences and suggested that anyone else still interested in the product try to find one where other products often find a second life: eBay. For backers, the collapse was a bitter confirmation of what many suspected. They would never receive their coolest cooler. Kickstarter acknowledged the unfortunate outcome bluntly, stating that, quote, "In this case, unfortunately, 1/3 of the backers won't receive the reward they were promised." The company reiterated that there is always a risk in creating something new and that sometimes projects fail. Coolest liquidation sale offered remaining inventory at steep discounts, and the company sought to pay off creditors. Liquidation ads urged people to, quote, "get them before they're gone," turning the once coveted product into clearance merchandise. In the aftermath, Grepper essentially disappeared. By 2024, reporters noted that his online presence was minimal. All that was left was an inactive LinkedIn page and a silent Twitter account. He did not launch new Kickstarter campaigns, and his absence left many questions unanswered. Some commenters argued that the real cause of failure was mismanagement and unrealistic pricing. Others sympathized with the tariff explanation. Either way, the coolest story had ended not with a triumphant shipping spree, but with a whimper. And then once again, Randall has written underneath that paragraph,
"Sorry, I can't hear your whimpering over this awesome blender built into this sick-ass cooler."
Because I just said whimper, so that's how he used the word whimper. I said I would be angry if it was a party joke, and that's technically not a party joke, but it's close. But what can we, as well as anyone interested in starting their own campaign, learn from the coolest cooler? Well, the story is a blend of a blender, like a cooler. Okay, I'm suing him. I'm gonna sue him or I'm gonna kill him. I don't know. The story is a blend. He wrote beneath blend that Logan wrote that one. I don't believe him. That was Randall. I do not believe him. The story is a blend of every pitfall that can ensnare a crowdfunding product: unrealistic budgeting, manufacturing bottlenecks, poor communication, backer backlash, legal scrutiny, and a dream that flies too close to the sun. Each element is a lesson in itself. The first thing to take from this: don't underestimate cost. Grepper estimated that the coolest would retail for $2.99, offering early backers a steep discount. In hindsight, this pricing left no cushion for delays, redesigns, or shipping. When unforeseen expenses arose, like the blender motor strike or shipping overruns, the project ran out of money. Even without the sudden influx of interest and need to scale production, it's hard to imagine he would have been able to meet his targets given the cost. Even if nothing went wrong that did go wrong, that dollar amount meant something was going to go wrong. Kickstarter's new project budget tool encourages creators to think through cost more carefully. If Grepper had priced the early units more accurately, the project might have been more sustainable, but it also would almost certainly have been smaller. Chasing a viral hit may have been his undoing. On top of that, delivering 60,000 units within 6 months was never realistic. Manufacturing takes time, and quality control cannot be rushed. Many successful crowdfunding campaigns now build in long timelines, stretching delivery promises to a year or more. Backers may be more patient if expectations are managed from the start. The coolest multiple delays eroded trust, showing that transparency about production challenges is crucial. Selling on Amazon before fulfilling Kickstarter orders violated an unwritten rule of crowdfunding. It signaled that the company valued new revenue over loyalty. Even if Amazon sales were necessary, the rollout could have been handled differently. For example, by offering the same expedited option at the same price exclusively to backers before opening retail sales. Sure, some people would probably be mad by the option, but it's better than offering the option to people that aren't backers. The backlash against the $97 fee, the doxing, and the threats all stemmed in part from frustration with communication. While there's no justification for harassment, companies can mitigate anger by being open about challenges. Instead of telling backers to hang in there without concrete updates, Grepper's team might have offered detailed explanations on manufacturing woes, cost breakdowns, and a transparent plan for raising more funds. This approach may not have pleased everyone because it's impossible to please everyone, but it could have preserved goodwill. At the end of the day, the short-lived success of the coolest cooler could not have been possible without its backers. And it is the backers themselves who were the first victims in the Wild West of crowdfunding. Some backers lost their discretionary income, while others felt emotionally invested in the product only to be forgotten. For them, the experience eroded trust in the Coolest Cooler, and in crowdfunding generally. As one backer wrote, quote, "There should be a unique place in purgatory for projects like Coolest Cooler." And there is. This video. The Coolest Cooler no longer remembered as a beloved product, but a mistake that I'm now talking about. But it's important to remember that, behind the numbers, percentages, and statistics, are people who believed in a promise, who believed in a cooler that was supposed to be the coolest. When a project goes viral, the scale can magnify its risks, and this example is hardly the only one. Around the same time as Coolest implosion, the Xano mini drone project, billed as the world's most sophisticated nano drone, raised £2.3 million, or about $3.5 million, and collapsed without ever seeing the light of day. It's not like the Coolest Cooler was the only failed Kickstarter campaign that failed spectacularly, but its great heights just led to a bigger fall. As of early 2026, the Coolest Cooler remains a ghost story, told around the fires of crowdfunding conferences and startup meetups. Many of the coolers that did ship were reviewed as heavy and overpriced. PC Mag described it as, quote, "An overpriced cooler that comes with a number of mediocre gadgets that you can easily improve upon by buying them individually." Even those who received the product sometimes considered it a novelty rather than a practical tool. The remaining units have become collector's items in a strange way, like a symbol of optimism gone awry. Which, that would be me. I absolutely want a Coolest Cooler. Not because I think it would even be that good or, dare I say, cool, but because I have to have the cooler from the infamous failed Kickstarter campaign. Meanwhile, Ryan Greer, once the face of viral crowdfunding success, has largely vanished from public view. Whether he'll ever return with a new invention or whether he has retreated permanently remains unknown. These lingering coolers are also physical reminders of the time that slipped by. For the more than 20,000 backers who never received a unit, the wait stretched more than 5 years. Many of them moved houses, changed jobs, or started families in the interim. Others expressed a kind of grief. What started as excitement in the summer of 2014 became frustration in 2015, anger in 2016, resignation in 2017, and by 2019, a weary sign as the final update landed in their inbox. One backer quipped online, quote, "I backed this cooler when my son was in diapers. He's in kindergarten now, and we still have no cooler." I mean, that's kind of funny. I mean, right, that's a little bit funny to like scale the cooler Kickstarter timeline off of your child. like this, not to discredit the backer, I understand his point, but I just imagine, like, as his child's born, growing up, going to kindergarten, he's tapping his foot like, "I'm still waiting on that cooler." The longer backers waited, the more emotionally invested they became. Not in the product, but in the outcome. And when that outcome was failure, the sense of betrayal was amplified. The passage of time also changed how the story was told. Early coverage in 2014 and 2015 focused on innovation and fun. By 2016, headlines emphasized controversy. By 2019, the narrative had shifted to legal battles and tariffs. In 2020 and beyond, the Coolest Cooler appeared mostly in retrospectives about crowdfunding disasters. Perhaps posted by a YouTuber who acts like he's some journalistic point of view when in reality he is still a child inside of a bedroom. For Greer himself, the timeline must have felt even more personal. In 2013, he had a failed campaign, and in 2014, he achieved viral success, raising millions. By 2016, he was grappling with a public relations crisis, and by 2019, he was closing the business and retreating from view. His journey is one end of the spectrum with how quickly fortune can turn in the internet age. In interviews during the saga, he often emphasized his passion and intention to deliver, and he didn't seem malicious. Yet the consequences of his miscalculations were felt by tens of thousands. It's hard not to feel at least a little sorry for the guy whose only fault may have been having a dream that was just a little too big, and for wildly underestimating production costs and overpromising something to tens of thousands of people. Okay, it sounds slightly less sympathetic when you lay it out like that, but I still feel a little bit bad for the guy. He had a cool invention, he just wasn't great at business. At some point, it was his responsibility to at least bring someone on who was good at business, but I digress. We love to applaud big thinkers who make these visions come to life, the Steve Jobs and the Walt Disneys of the world. But for every success story, there are thousands of other stories about failures and what could have beens. And most of those tales have the fortune of playing out behind closed doors rather than on such a vast public stage. The Coolest Cooler is now widely regarded as the biggest failure in Kickstarter's history. It stands as a symbol of what happens when hype outruns execution. Yet it also spurred positive change. Kickstarter implemented new policies to educate backers and hold creators accountable. Creators learned to set more realistic goals and budgets, and regulators recognized the need to protect consumers in this new digital arena. Though it was designed to bring joy, what Ryan Greer ultimately created was a case study. For every aspiring entrepreneur watching, the lessons are clear. From its humble beginnings through record-breaking fundraising, chronic delays, controversial decisions, legal interventions, and final collapse, The Coolest Cooler is almost like a Shakespearean play set in the world of tech. People often say failure is the greatest teacher, and in that sense, maybe The Coolest Cooler did succeed. Just not in the way anyone expected or wanted it to. Because its real legacy isn't the product itself. It's the blueprint it left behind for the next person bold enough to give it a try. And also the blueprint for a cooler that can play music and blend eyes, which admittedly is pretty cool. And that should do it for the controversial Coolest Cooler Kickstarter campaign controversy. I think that's all the words I can think of that start with the letter C. Well, Kickstarter starts with a K, so all the things that start with a K sound. Like I said, I don't hate Greer. I understand why people were frustrated, but I think we can all agree that a lot of people took it way too far. More than anything, it seems like a story of a bunch of people who got excited about a product, including Greer, and that product just couldn't be delivered on. All in all, I think it's a fascinating story, and I'm glad that you stuck around to hear about it, and we just want to say thank you for watching. Wait, I didn't even mix in the words crowdfunding or conspiracy. Controversial Coolest Cooler Kickstarter campaign controversial conspiracy crowdfund catastrophe. Yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much for sticking around, the support you've shown on all the channels lately. Over here on Wendigoon, you guys have really been killing it a lot lately. The support means the world, and the past few videos have done great, and it means a lot to us, and it means a lot that this little harebrained scheme to put together a bunch of people to make cool videos is paying off, and you guys seem to like it. Let us know what you'd like to see more of in the comments below. I'm sure if there's something you're interested in, we can find out something about it. Uploads over here Mondays at noon, and check out the other channels Wendigoon and Wendiglitch in the description below. Everyone who made this video possible will be credited in the description. Be sure to show them some love, except for Randall. And all in all, I believe that should do it for now, but before I go, we just want to say thank you for watching. We hope that you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye! I mean, surely there has to be one of them on sale somewhere, like eBay or something, right? Oh my gosh, there is. Oh, dude. It even has the plate still. There's no way. They want $500 for it. That's so overpriced, but oh, it looks in great condition. It still has the speaker and everything. It's $500 and it's lime green. I have to do it, right? Like, I've made the video on it, and I can be, even if it's an awful cooler, I can forever be like, hey, you want to know the story of that stupid cooler over there? I'll tell it to you. I'll send you the link right now. I'm going to buy it. Yeah, I'm going to buy it.